Hey, welcome back to the Expert Edge. I'm excited for this conversation today. Let's finish your year strong. I don't know how your year has been. We've had a really good year, actually, to be quite frank, but that hasn't been the case for absolutely everyone. I totally get it. And not every year is an amazing year, right? There's ups and downs. We've had a really, really strong year. And so I wanted to do this podcast to encourage everyone here. If you feel like this year hasn't been as good as you wanted it to be, I share with you kind of 3 key strategies for you to make the back end of this year, 2024, really strong, like to finish the year strong, to make more money, to make more impact, to make have more meaning in your life so that you can continue to move forward. So I don't care how your year has been this year. Well, I do care, but I'm saying that even if you've had a tough year so far, that doesn't mean that the back end of this year is going to be exactly like that. You can turn that thing around and make it incredible. And I share some cool stories and examples about how I've done that in my life at different points on the podcast today. So let's get into it about making your year strong. Hey, it's Colin, and you are listening to the Expert Edge podcast. I was a professional speaker for over a decade, and now I focus on helping coaches, speakers, and course creators to speak and sell on virtual and live stages. The Expert Edge podcast is weekly content focused on helping you build your expert business. We cover marketing, storytelling, sales, communication skills, and so much more. Thanks for taking the time to tune in, and make sure you subscribe and follow us on all our social channels so you don't miss a thing. Let's listen to today's episode. Welcome back to the Expert Edge. Let's have a conversation about finishing the year strong. How has your year been? It's really fascinating because I'm in quite a few masterminds, and it's kind of like 50-50 with people. I've got a lot of people who I'm friends with who this year has been pretty tough. Like, they've struggled to grow their business. I've got some friends who their business has actually declined by 20, 30, even 35% in terms of their business. Like, it's been a really tough year for them. And I've also got friends who are absolutely crushing it, like biggest years they've ever had, biggest months they've ever had, absolutely crushing it. And so, so often, I think everyone is on their own journey, right? There's no like perfect way of doing this, no perfect way of, doing this journey as an expert. But I also think it's kind of interesting to come back at, what can you control? What can you influence? Because it is very easy to basically find justifications for why you are getting a certain result. Now, I am not an extremist when it comes to, being at cause in your life. Like, I'm not an extremist from the sense of, when I did my coaching diploma and learnt about coaching, one of the core principles of coaching is being at cause. Now, I think it's a powerful principle, that idea of like, you are the cause of what happens in your world and in your life. Like, hands down, people who are at cause create results, make more money, make more impact, 1000%. And I also think there are some extreme circumstances, some luck to this thing, some, extenuating circumstances that happen in people's lives that really impact them. So like, I do have empathy and understanding for that as well. And so as we talk about this conversation today and reflect on the year so far, and then really focus on how do we finish strong, I want you to take this from the sense of, you shouldn't feel any shame about this. You shouldn't feel any sort of like this sense of failure if you don't feel like this year has gone as well as you wanted it to. And on the same note, I think that if you feel like you're in that place, then maybe you do need a reset. Like, you need a reset of going back into this sense of, how am I at cause of this? How am I creating this? How can I influence the next 3 to 4 months coming into the end of this year and close out this year really strong? Because there is 1000% still a good chance that you can finish the year and be ahead, be moving forward, be going in the direction that you want to go in. Does that make sense? In the early stages of my coaching business, I remember receiving a phone call from a client Now, this was when I used to do a lot of corporate training. I would come into companies and do a lot of, 1-day workshops, 2-day workshops. I would do a lot of individual coaching, and it was great. Like, really enjoyed it. But I remember I had this client, and that client represented about 60% of my income. At the time, they were worth, a couple $100,000 kind of to me. And so they were a really significant client. And I'd signed them onto a contract of delivering a certain amount of training over the year. Now, they were a mining client. They were in the mining industry. And what happened was, in Australia at the time when I lived there, the mining industry just went through like a really challenging period. And so they were kind of making a lot of cuts. And, they're pretty intense, cutthroat kind of company people. They're miners, right? I'm definitely not a miner. You would not want me to be on your mining team, by the way. I wouldn't perform that well. But I remember getting a phone call from the director, and he was cool. He was a good guy. But he basically said, "Hey, Colin, we're going through a really tough period. We're cutting a lot of people from the company. Like, they had 120, 130 employees, big costs, like big budgets. And they're like, we're in dire straits. Like, we have to cut back." And they said, "That contract I have with you," they're like, "we cannot fulfill it. We're basically going to have to cut the contract." And, I'm kind of starting my coaching business. I felt like I didn't have much pull there. And I'm like, okay. And I remember getting off the phone call and just literally feeling like, oh my gosh, I just had basically a couple $100,000 off my revenue targets or my revenue projection for the rest of this year. And this was like February, right? This was earlier in the year. But I remember feeling really defeated. I don't know if you've had an experience like that where maybe it was a client, they asked for a refund, or maybe it was a client didn't go as well, or maybe you thought a launch was going to go really well and it just flunked. Like, you've had some experiences like that. And I remember I really felt defeated after that. I was thinking, oh my gosh, like, we're not going to make enough money. We're going to, I'm going to end up on the streets. You go down that extreme. I'm going to be living on the streets. I'm going to be homeless, and I'm going to be on food stamps. Like, I'm going down that pathway already, right? But I remember I kind of pulled up the nosedive from that and, went inside. And I was reflecting on the fact that I just really felt defeated. Now, I felt quite defeated for a little bit of time, a couple of days, but I remember going through a process where I started to refocus and imagine what my business could look like, what my life could look like. And I started to shift some of the meanings that I was creating from this experience. And one of the first meanings I created was that, I felt like this was the end of me having a great year. I felt like the revenue wasn't going to come in. I wasn't going to make as much money. Things weren't going to go great. Like, that was the first kind of meaning I created. Another meaning I created was that I felt like, this was a punishment because I hadn't put certain things in place, or I didn't have enough diversity of clients. And because I'd done that, I was just really getting hammered for that, right? And so I was just so focused on myself, on feeling terrible about myself, on just feeling like, woe to me, things are hard for me, all that sort of stuff. And I got to a point where I realized I needed to make a shift. I needed to make a change. And I kind of reimagined, I reframed, you could say, the meaning that I put on that event. And I remember it being so powerful for me. The reframe was that no longer was this the end. I was like, what if this was the start of something magical for me in my business? And I started to think about, well, I've got a lot more space now in my calendar to be able to work with more clients that I even enjoy more, because, like, they were a good client, but I didn't kind of love going out into the mining industry and doing that sort of stuff. I wanted to work with, some more innovative clients and different clients in my local area at the time. This was when I was very focused on, in-house trainings. What was cool was I started to get this new sense of energy about my business and about my life, and I started to get it refocused. Fast forward to the end of that year, I finished out with the strongest year we've ever had. We blew the revenue targets out of the water. And I realized that experience was such a defining moment for me in reimagining the type of clients that I could work with and the type of work that I could do. And so I share that story because I think some of you have been through some experiences, some failures, some challenges, whether it's in a business challenge, a health challenge, a personal challenge this year. And on some level, maybe it was on an unconscious level, it felt like it was the end. It felt like it was a punishment. It felt like, just a really difficult time, which I'm not saying it wasn't, like, right? Like, you probably have gone through some difficult times. But the reason why I'm sharing that story is, what if that is actually the catalyst for you going to the next level? Like, what if the experiences you've gone through this year that maybe didn't go as well as you wanted them to go, or maybe were challenges that you didn't expect? What if that was actually on some level working for you, not against you? It was actually happening for you. And so as we come into the end of this year, 2024, I want you to think about, what are the meanings you've created from some of the experiences that you've had. You see, some of you are still carrying some heavy meanings, some heavy failures, some heaviness of past failures that you've deemed as failures. And you're thinking about the rest of the year, and it's almost like you're on autopilot. And so I want to kind of wake you up today and encourage you to get refocused till the end of the year. If you've run any sort of launch before, you'll know that when you do an open cart for a launch, 50% of your revenue, 50% of the results and the clients can come in the last 6 to 7 hours of that launch. So you might have an open enrollment for 7 days, and 50% of the people who join the program join in the last 5 to 7 hours of the entire 7-day period. And so I want to remind you that coming into the end of this year, you can have the best results that you've ever had in your life coming into the end of this year. Now, as you come into the end of this year, I want you to revisit, what are your goals? And some of you may have to adjust those goals. I think it's okay to adjust my goals, based on kind of how I'm going. I'll sometimes adjust my goals, but I'm not going to diminish them right down. But I'll go, okay, what is not just a realistic, but a stretch goal for me that is going to push me to achieve more by the end of the year? The big encouragement I want you to think about today in terms of this podcast and this conversation I'm having with you is to access a new level of curiosity with what you're doing. Now, one of the greatest strategies I've found to creating results fast is to think about what has worked in the past well for me. So have a think about this year. I know maybe sometimes you had some things that haven't worked as well, but I want you to think about, what's some things that have worked really well for you this year? Some things that have brought in clients, that have brought in followers, that have brought in momentum in your business. And I want you to think about it from the sense of, how could you do that more coming into the end of this year? I had a reflection that, in our business, there are different ways that people join our programs. And I've tested lots of different, kind of pathways and avenues. And I realized that one of the best ways for us to grow our business, to serve more people, to have more clients come on board, is for me to run presentations. Now, I know that I teach that, and I know you're like, well, of course, Colin. But I realized, if I get people in front of me and we go through a certain process, there's a good chance that they're going to come and join one of my programs. And so instead of trying lots of other random things that we're really struggling to get working, I'm like, why don't we just do more of what's actually working? And so for us, planning into the end of this year and even the front end of next year, what has actually worked in the past, and what do we need to do? So if we did more of those in the future, just increase the reps of that, increase the focus of that, then we can accelerate it. Does that make sense? It's interesting. My wife and I work very closely on our Instagram together, and she's been such a pivotal part of me growing my brand and my Instagram. I have to get Sarah onto the podcast again, guys. I know she hasn't been on the podcast for a while, but she's amazing. And one of the things that she taught me in growing social media was that it's so simple, but she's like, Colin, open up your reels and just look at which reels have got the most views or which reels have got the most shares, and just do either repost that same reel or do another version of that same reel with a new shirt and a slightly different story, but with the same kind of angle, and that's going to go well again. And it pretty much like 90% of the time does. It's so fascinating how stuff that worked in the past, you can literally just replicate the same thing. This is why, when people come into Sell From Stage Academy, when they really get this idea of you only need one irresistible presentation to run a multi-million dollar business. I've got a good friend of mine. She does a weekly webinar. She runs the same webinar every Monday. She runs it. She fills up the webinar with Facebook ads and some organic traffic. She runs the same webinar every single Monday. She's been doing it for about a year and a half. So she's ran, like 70 or 75 of those webinars. She said she hasn't missed a day, and she's generating about $300,000 to $400,000 a week. Isn't that insane? Per week, guys, not per month, per week, like 2 to 3 to 400,000, depending on the webinar, per week in sales. And so I share that because she's one of my friends who's absolutely crushing it this year. And do you know what she's doing? She's doing what works. She's delivering the same presentation to a new group of people because she's running Facebook ads to it, right? So she's generating new audiences, but it's the same flipping presentation over and over and over and over again. And what I find is if you get onto something that's working, like you got to milk that puppy and refine that puppy. Like you've got to keep milking and refining it so that you can grow it. Now, what I always recommend to do is keep doing more of what's working and then test little experiments with things along the way. By the way, I got some amazing feedback from a podcast that I did recently. And if you haven't listened to it, which is the 3 quick cash strategies, I think that podcast couples really well with what we're talking about today, because that's where I share 3 quick ways that you can like bring in cash. In fact, I got so many emails and text messages and DMs about that particular episode. So definitely go and check that out. But the reason why I share that is some of you might just need to do some quick cash strategies, right? Coming into the end of this year. But like I said, what I always think about with our business is going back to what is working, doing more of that. And that's easy, because it's like we've already built the structures in place, we've built the systems, we've built the assets. So I can just keep doing that, and that's working great. And then I like to like test little things. So for example, like we have an event that we run with our Sell From Stage Academy students. It's amazing. And I run that a couple of times a year. It's a virtual event that helps our Academy students implement Sell From Stage Academy methodology. But we were talking even today of going like, well, what if we could run like an event in between that and just test a few different events that could help our students as well? And so we keep doing what's working, but we also implement like other things outside of it that will take a bit more work because they're a new thing. But if that works great, we're going to keep doing that. Does that make sense? And so keep doing what's working, and then do little experiments, like put on your curiosity hat, your scientist hat, and go, I wonder what would happen with this. I know for us, I remember testing a product to my email list. I came up with this idea of going, what if someone could buy like just one module of one of my main programs? And I sent an email to my list just offering for sale of one module of one of our programs. And we did about $5,000 or $6,000 in sales in about 24 hours. And I was like, that was really cool. And that actually sparked an idea for another idea for a mini course, which kind of led into Conversion Story Formula. And if you haven't done Conversion Story Formula, that's our first kind of product that a lot of people do. It's cheap. It's like $47 at the time, right? Time of this recording. I think, honestly, I could sell it for $1,000. It's that good. But it basically helps people design a story that sells their stuff. And that's just the start of what I teach people to do. But the biggest thing is like that story product came out of some experimentation. And so keep doing what you do best. Keep delivering what has been working. Go back into your, backlog and go, what has been working? And then go, what are some little iterations I can do? Give that a go. And finally, I would just make sure you revisit your plan coming into the end of this year. We have a 90-day planning system that we use in Sell From Stage Elite. That's my coaching group where I do coaching. In fact, I'm about to jump on a coaching call in about an hour with all my students. And we do a 90-day planning document, 90-day planning session, where basically it maps out the projects, or the goals, the projects, the theme, and then the key actions you have to do for the quarter on one document. And so my encouragement for you is just to sit down and go, like, what are the core projects that are going to move forward towards the goals we're getting? And then what are some key, actions we need to do? And so if you haven't revisited something like that, where you've got a planning document or some sort of plan coming into the next year, definitely create a plan. It's going to make a big focus. So I want to sum this up with just an encouragement for you that if you've had some challenges this year, what if those challenges happened for you and they were actually the beginning of a whole new level for you in your business? That's the first thing. The second thing is go back to what's working. What's worked in the past? What's gone well? Do some more of those coming into the end of this year. And then maybe try one little experiment, something small, like a mini course or some sort of mini offer that you could do. See how that resonates with your audience. It could spark something else, something great. And then finally, create a plan. Get clear on your goals again. Spend half an hour to revisit your goals. Revisiting your goals is strategic time. It's quantum time. It's high value time. What's weird about goal setting is it feels like you're doing nothing. Don't you think? Like, it's like you're not actually doing something. You're not taking an action, you're not answering an email, but it's a strategic direction that pushes all your energy towards where it needs to go. And so revisit your goals, reclarify your goals, create your top 3 projects that you're working on, and lean into the back end of this year. Hey, I'd love to know what's been most helpful, most valuable from our podcast today. If this has been valuable and you haven't left a review on iTunes podcast yet, please leave a written review. I'd really appreciate that. If you do leave a written review, take a screenshot, send it to me on Instagram, just at Colin Boyd, and I'll send you over a free course that we also do sell, but you can have that for free if you do a review and just as a little present, just to say thank you. The second thing is if you're a coach, a speaker, a course creator, and you're wanting to create your story that converts, definitely check out Conversion Story Formula. If you're ready to create your webinar or your keynote, your presentation, you want to build a high converting talk, which is kind of the cornerstone of building an expert business, definitely go and check out colinboyd.co/workshop. It's a free workshop which takes you through the 5 aspects of building out a high converting talk. That's completely free. And if you are already generating $5,000 or more in your coaching business and you're wanting to scale up to $40,000, $50,000 a month, that's what I help people do in our Sell From Stage Elite program. So you can just go to colinboyd.co/scale. And I'd love to set up a short strategy call with one of our coaches where they can kind of have a look at where you're at, where your business, where some of your goals are, what your challenges are, and we can have a chat about whether it's something that we can help you with or not. We may not be able to help you with it, but we might be able to. I'm not sure, right? It's not a high pressure call. It's literally just a conversation about where you're at with your business and see if it's something that we can help you with. colinboyd.co/scale. Guys, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. Thanks for being an Expert Edge listener. Make sure you're following the show so you don't miss any of our sessions, and make sure to go and check out that 3 quick cash strategies. If you haven't checked that out, great podcast as well. Bless you guys. Hope you're well, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Expert Edge. Bye for now.